Welcome to the Circle 31 podcast. I'm your host, Ayana Robinson Dixon, and this is the Love Series. My guests today are Mark and Vanessa Harris. Mark and Vanessa are a retired military couple who've been married for almost 20 years. In our conversation today, Mark and Vanessa talk to us about transparency in marriage, effective communication, and also how to take responsibility for our own past rather than depending on our spouse to work through that for us. Now, here is my conversation with Mark and Vanessa Harris.
I'm Mark, and this is my wife, Vanessa. Mark Harris and Vanessa Harris. We are a couple here living in the Houston area, and we've been married nearly 20 years, come next month, actually. I'm a senior program manager for an oil and gas company here in the area, and I'll let my wife tell you what she does.
As he said, I'm Vanessa Harris. We did say we live in the Houston area,
Yes.
right? Okay. So prior to staying home and taking care of our 3 children, I am a pediatrician and a preventive medicine physician. So I did those things, and then like he said, being in the military, a number of factors made it clear that I should stay home and take care of my own children. So that's what I've been doing for over 18 years now.
Well, Mark and Vanessa, welcome to the Circle 31 podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So I want to ask you, how important is transparency in building a relationship with someone?
Well, I'll start. Being that we're almost 20 years in, transparency in a relationship is probably the most important aspect of a relationship. When we started off, I thought we knew what transparency was. I thought I knew what transparency was, but it may have just taken almost 20 years to really, truly figure out what transparency is. I think I wrote down a couple of things, but really the biggest building block in a relationship is transparency and communication. I think that's where it begins, that's where it starts, and everything else builds around that.
Yeah, I would just say it's that vulnerability that allows there to be trust in the relationship. So it's more than just sharing things. It's sharing without reserve. And if you know that somebody won't withhold anything from you, then the trust in them is easy at that point. It's easier for sure.
So you mentioned sharing. So how soon do you begin sharing personal baggage while in a serious relationship with someone? How soon do you do that?
I said immediately when I was looking at that. I think it's immediately. And I say that because you kind of weed out those who aren't supposed to be around. If you start sharing certain things, you might push somebody away that can't handle it, but you also give the person the opportunity to receive that information, see how they process that information, and see how empathetic they are to that information. I think being transparent is kind of, we've kind of grown up in the era where dating was kind of putting on your best mask and putting on your best facade, and then not until later do you really find out who you have. And we can certainly talk about that. But I think what we know now, if we were speaking to folks that are just starting this, I would say immediately.
Now, here's where we're opposites.
Okay.
We are opposites. I would say after you have had a time of considering whether this person is somebody that really is marriage material, then I would say that would be the time to be transparent about the things that you necessarily don't want them to run away from, but you want to see how they contain what you give them, what they do with it. And rather than me try to scare you off at the beginning, I'd rather just make sure you're anybody that I need to fool with further than this. And then once you make that cut, then that would be the next thing I would look into, is start putting things out there, sharing with them, and seeing how they reciprocate and go from there.
Okay, two different perspectives there. Thank you both for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So, as you begin to become vulnerable with a person that you believe God is leading you to spend the rest of your life with, what do you think are some things that you should take note of as each of you are sharing personal experiences, information? What are some things that you should be watching for?
For me, one of the things is how they respond. Is it like shock and awe, or is it with an understanding nod? Is it with a sort of tell me more invitation? That would be key to me. Also, if they reciprocate in kind, do they also then tell you something? Do they meet you in that and then offer their own tale of woe or whatever it is that they want to share? And then I would say what, and this is probably the most important for me, is what work they have done to deal with whatever they're sharing. Is it just like a fact that they're throwing out, or has there been some, whether it's therapy or whether it's just education or whatever they have done to sort of deal with what they're sharing with you, I think goes a long way into how they care for themselves and then how they care for you.
That's good. Mark, do you have any thoughts?
I'll add this. Do they give you the ability to feel safe while you're sharing? Because if you don't feel safe sharing something that's that personal and that probably just critical in your life, I think if there's no level of safety, then you won't do it. You will immediately become fearful of doing that. And I think that's a key, because if you are fearful in it, we know that God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but the enemy will often jump in our relationships by pressing fear, and especially when it comes to being vulnerable. As a man, vulnerability is something I'm coming to grips with. You know, I thought I knew vulnerability, and I'm learning it deeper and deeper and deeper as I grow older. But the main culprit or hindrance to any level of vulnerability is the fear that you're not safe when you're making yourself vulnerable.
Now, communication has come up, so I want to ask, why is effective communication important in courtship and in marriage?
So I would say effective communication is the key word there, because we can communicate and not do it effectively and be speaking two different languages in the same household. And I can attest, we have done that on numerous occasions. Communication is not my strongest gift in the household. Great communicator outside of the household. But inside this relationship, communication has been one of the areas that I've struggled with profusely. So I would say that it's so important in courtship, because you begin to learn who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. But what happens, especially in a case where you feel like you are communicating well, you get into marriage, and if that area of vulnerability or that fear jumps in, you might stop communicating. And there are many times and many different things that will happen within marriage that will make you want to stop communicating. And when you do that, you leave yourself open for quite a bit of just negativity in your marriage. And I'll let you jump in.
For me, the effective communication starts with how you communicate with yourself. I think a lot of people are not honest with themselves. And so they have a terrible time being honest with other people, honest with God, quite frankly. And so we're coming into a lot of marriages acting as if the marriage itself is sort of going to fix things that we have not dealt with in our own past. And if I could give an analogy, it would be as if marriage is the poopery for the loaded diaper that we walk around with. And if people live in a denial of what they have been through and how they need to deal with it, they bring that into their marriage and expect their spouse to ignore what they smell. And so part of the ineffective communication is if the one spouse is smelling something that the other person wants to pretend is not happening, then you feel condemned as the person with the issue. And then you want to deny it and you want to push the other person away. And then there's a lot of blaming. So I think the best thing anyone can do is work on or address or analyze how honest I am with myself before I invite someone else into the mix, because I need to be as honest with them.
That is so good. Very excellent points being brought out, and working on communication with each other, but starting with yourself to make sure you're being honest, because if we're not honest with ourselves, we're not going to be able to have that open relationship with our spouse. That's really good. I wanted to ask you both what significance the Song of Songs 5:16 has in your lives and marriage.
Song of Songs 5:16. His mouth is sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. I think this is significant to us because so many people fail to become friends before they get married, and they're trying to begin a friendship in marriage. And if you don't have the foundation of friendship when you're coming into a relationship like marriage, which is it's just such a vulnerable and just transparency, all this stuff. When you get married, you see everything. So you have to really be friends before you come into marriage, because there are so many areas the enemy wants to distract us, target us, attack in us, to keep us from seeing the very friend that we walked into this marriage with. And if you're not on top of trying to do all these things with communication, everything that we talked about and so much more, what happens is you can start off as friends and easily become enemies. But you be able to have an anchor to the fact that this is my friend and I need to maintain that friendship first. She's not my enemy. She's always been my friend. And so what has happened to make me see her as an enemy, let's deal with that, because this is my friend. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. I think another verse that we had loved from Song of Songs is, and I don't remember where it is, but it's, I have found the one whom my soul loves. Yeah. And when you think about the soul and it's being mind, will, and emotions, the emotions of marriage fluctuate, wane, go down, whatever you want to call it. But there has to be an element of, I've made a decision and I am going to do the work of loving the person, even when I don't feel like it. And I think if you don't have that mindset coming in, then when the feelings go up and down for whatever reason, you have nothing else to pull on. And then it's, well, I don't have love for you anymore, so that's it. When really there has to be an element of, we have decided that we are going to be married. I'm going to love you. It won't feel maybe the emotional way that you would like, but express it in some way as an act of your will, while you wait for the emotion piece to come back. So that's what I'd say about that.
Wow, that is excellent. Making a decision to love.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of the ups and downs, I have made the decision already. So regardless of what the enemy brings, what life brings, decision has already been made.
Right.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Vanessa, you're an author. Can you talk to us about what you have published?
My very first book is not the book I even wanted to write, but it's the one that the Lord wanted me to write. It's called Daddy's Girl Forever, Come Home to the Truth About God's Heart Towards You. And I wrote it because when I was trying to write a book for mothers, the Lord said, no, I want to talk to women as daughters before I talk. And he was including me in that. And so in writing the book, it was for me, but it was also for many other women who can relate to Jesus as Savior. Everybody loves Jesus. He's the good guy. But when you get to God the Father, it's sketchy, depending on your relationship with your own father. And the whole point of Jesus is to bring us to the Father. So we're missing a key element in the strength of our walk when we don't have that kind of ability to come running to our Father. So this book addresses that. It addresses the insecurity that comes when you don't have an identity that your Father gives you, and how that bleeds into other areas of your life. So it's been a blessing to me to write. A lot of tears writing the book, and it has helped a lot of other women as well. So thank you for asking about it.
Of course. Where would our listeners find your book?
You can find it on my website, vinelifefaith.com/books, or you can search it directly on Amazon.
So Mark and Vanessa, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listening audience?
Don't get weary in well-doing. We are almost 20 years, and for all of the responses that we've given to your questions, it has not been an easy 20 years. Yeah. And so that will and that decision piece is something that you will, if you choose to, if you decide to, you'll have to lean on often. And that's not failing. I think people feel like if they don't have the emotions, or if their marriage doesn't look like someone else's, that they're failing and they may as well throw in the towel. But that's not the case. You don't know what anybody else is going through, but what you do know is sometimes you can get weary in doing the right thing. But we keep going forward, believing that there will be and continue to be an even greater harvest as we do so, if not even just for ourselves, for our children. Yeah. So,
and I would just say, she said that so perfectly, but I would also just say to those folks out there that are married, especially, she's worth it. He's worth it. There will be challenging times, but fight through it. Do the work. Work on yourself. Work on each other. But it's worth it. That same beautiful bride that walked down the aisle, that same handsome gentleman that was waiting for you when you walked down, they're the same ones that are there now, and they're worth it. So continue to do what's necessary to love that person, to give him or her all you got, and just remember at the end of the day, they're worth it.
Mark and Vanessa, I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge that you've gained over your years of marriage, and we want to thank you so much for being our guests today on the Circle 31 podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. We really enjoyed it.
That concludes today's episode of the Love Series. We hope that you were encouraged and inspired. Visit our website at circle31internationalwomensministry.org to sign up to receive podcast updates. And as a thank you for signing up, you will receive the 28-day Love Series devotional guide. Check out our YouTube channel for the Love Series playlist. It's a collection of our guests' favorite songs. You can find us on YouTube at Circle 31 Women's MIN. That's Circle 31 WOMENS MIN. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Thank you for joining us today.